Yeah, once again, my name is Luke Monsala Hadeen. I'm one of the peer-to-peer co-chairs. In a little bit, you'll get to learn about who TNB is and what these Project Peace host rooms serve. Today, the big topic for today is school resource officers. And this is a very important conversation we want to have, not only as it pertains to the community, but as because within TNB, we've had a diverse uh, coalescence of opinions in here. And I really want to stress how important it is to involve both the community and SROs in the discussion. We do have two wonderful guest speakers with us who are more than capable of telling us everything we need to know. And I really appreciate if whoever decides to participate today does so in a respectful manner. I really hope to hear some of your words, and I'd really like to have the discussion go smoothly. And then Maggie, go ahead.
Yes. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our SRO's host room. I am Maggie from Team Network Board and also a junior at Yorktown. Just to give some background, Team Network Board is a county and school-appointed teen advocacy group comprised of Arlington High School students from different backgrounds and parts of the county to provide community voice for Arlington youth. Today, we chose to bring this issue to the floor because as a group, we feel that is something that's important for Arlington youth to understand and share their feedback on SROs. This issue was brought to our attention through an Arlington Now article explaining how the NAACP called for the removal of SROs. After discussing this article and topic in great detail as a coalition and seeing how many people felt differently about the correct approach the county should take, we decided to create this host room in order to educate and spread awareness on the purpose of SROs and discuss their future in APS.
Thank you so much, Maggie, for introducing us to TNB. I'll go ahead and hand it over to Avalon, who will give us more information about Project Peace, which is another group that we're partnering with to present you with these talks. And in addition, this is a series, so this is only the first of many discussions we're going to have. Other topics include the college prep seminar. Based on this afternoon's discussion, we will determine the best course of action for continuing on this program. Go ahead, Avalon.
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Avalon from Teen Network Board, and I'm also a sophomore at Yorktown High School. I want to mention that this host room is a partnership endeavor with Project Peace, which is a coordinated community response dedicated to advancing the most effective and efficient array of education, prevention, protection, and support services to end domestic and sexual violence in the community. Ashley Blow is also here today from Project Peace. Ashley, would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Avalon. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to be here and excited to partner with TNB as we give them a platform to amplify their voice in important topics that they find necessary to share with youth in the community.
So moving on, we're going to introduce our detectives. First off, with Detective Souls and Detective Brooks. Each of you just take a minute to introduce yourself, starting with Detective Souls.
Hi, I'm Detective Kimberly Souls with the Arlington County Police Department. I have been with the department for about 5 years, and I recently joined the SRO unit in June of last year. So unfortunately, due to COVID, I haven't been inside of the schools, but I've been associated with the SROs before, and Detective Brooks is a good friend of mine, and we've been partnered up working on a project that we will discuss a little bit later in this presentation.
Yeah, definitely. Detective Brooks.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dorian Brooks. I am a school resource officer and 9-year veteran with the Arlington County Police Department. I've served in a few different areas, but the last 3 years I've spent as a school resource officer at the middle school and elementary school level. And so I just want to thank you guys for having me here to, dive into these conversations. And, I'll say now, just if you have questions, don't hold back. We're here for, to have these meaningful conversations. So thank you.
Yep. So thank you again to our guest speakers. They have a lot of work to say, and I really want to make sure that we get their opinion and hands involved in this issue. I didn't introduce myself fully. My name is Luke Montalhadine once again. I am a senior at WNO High School, and in addition, Peer-to-Peer is a committee within TNB that focuses on mental health awareness, random acts of kindness, and anti-bullying efforts. So we're really diverse and we're really inside the schools. And this is why we're really important about school-based issues, including SROs. And then I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Yasmina Mansour. She's the overall co-chair for TNB. And in addition to being our overall co-chair, she's also a part of the restorative justice project within the APS system. And in addition, she's also the part of the APS implementation team that really focuses on how we can put restorative justice into our schools. Yasmina, would you like to explain more and just give us a rundown about what restorative justice is?
Yeah, thanks, Lukman. So restorative justice is a process to resolve harm and conflicts that may arise in a community using restorative methods versus punitive methods. And this allows students to feel empowered to resolve conflicts on their own without the help of, say, an SRO or the administration of a school. And it's growing around schools around the country and especially in our own county. And the idea is to bring students together in peer-mediated small groups to talk and resolve the conflicts and figure out next steps by themselves.
Thank you again, Yasmina. So before we get started, I'm going to go ahead and explain the format of the discussion today. So first, we're going to have each detective answer a few questions. And then afterward, we're going to have an open question to anyone who's in attendance. And then after that, we'll have a quick discussion with everyone in attendance. So that's pretty much what this afternoon is going to look like. And we'll just get started now with Detective Souls. I'll just ask you a few questions. So could you just tell us more about what your job is and what kind of background you've had in this scenario, or in this work, sorry.
So again, right now I am with the SRO unit here at the police department. Again, my role as an SRO has been a little bit different than what Dorian will talk to. He'll be able to talk a little bit more about the day-to-day, how things go with schools with regards to the students, the admin, and the setup and the MOUs kind of between the school and our department. For us, it's been kind of trying to adjust the SRO unit to a world where we're not in school and school is virtual and COVID and in light of everything that's been going on. Prior to this, I was working patrol. I was serving as a senior officer. I worked our evening shift, so I got a little bit of everything as far as our calls went and time of day. Prior to becoming this, I kind of geared towards medicine. I actually was a big science nerd when I was in school and college. I thought I was going to be a doctor and changed my mind. Took a kind of different path, science related, and then ultimately ended up here. Kind of leads into your next question, I guess.
Yeah, a little bit. That's very interesting that you say you're going, at least you thought you're going into medicine, which is very interesting change, but I'm glad you made that change. So with that, why did you choose being a police officer and more specifically an SRO in this situation?
So I decided that I wanted to become a police officer because I really wanted to contribute to society. I wanted to give back. It was part of why I wanted to be a doctor. But as I experienced different things in life, what I wanted to do kind of changed. While I was figuring that out, I actually worked in the restaurant industry and I had a lot of good experiences with it. I learned a lot about myself and about working, but I wasn't feeling that I was contributing. And I knew that some sort of service is what was going to make me feel fulfilled. So I decided to join the police department. While here, I've really gotten interested in our special victims unit and working with restoring family circumstances and kind of seeing how the criminal justice system is very fluid and the treatment that needs to happen and the resources that need to be available to people varies. And it's not just cut and dry and you accept different resources that are available. And I think that mentorship and realizing the importance of resources to restore families and to restore either, mental health and have access to that and true treatment is what led me to SRO to hopefully kind of incorporate that and serve as a mentor and role model and help the kids.
I definitely agree. what you said about, changing your perspective on certain issues or just changing your perspective on life is very relevant to young people today. And on top of that, just being a community member at a young age is so important right now, especially with everything going on. And what you said is pretty much a lot of what young people are thinking now. So I'm glad you're able to share that with us. So you did talk about what you did in the Arlington community a bit, but has there been anything memorable, or what do you like to tell people when you say I work in Arlington County?
As far as working in the Arlington community, it's even before I was an officer here, I had nothing but great things to say about the county. It's been a great department to work for, and it's really been enjoyable to see how integrated the community is with itself and how many resources are available and how much the county truly cares about the people that live here, and trying to make everything more inhabitable, more enjoyable, and quality of life higher for everybody, to include the police department. Something that kind of ties in with the SRO stuff, and Dorian will touch on it more. We were working on a program that addresses a little bit of what you guys were discussing, and we wanted to create a platform for Arlington youth to actually discuss the things that are going on. Last year, bringing awareness to social injustices and problems within the community, and even questions about police mistrust and injustices. We wanted to have those discussions with teens and help build that trust, help hear the teenagers out, and really just have this understanding and become one to start building that trust and that relationship together by creating that platform. So that's been a program that we've been working on that we hope that we'll get to release to you guys soon and kind of see how it goes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what you're saying here. One fact I think everyone should know about Arlington: we're the smallest self-governing county in the country. So even though we are pretty small, we still face all of the global issues that we see at home and abroad. And I'm really appreciative of the fact that people like you and Dorian Brooks exist within our community to actually heal the divide, or even try and unite people under great causes that both young people and older individuals like you guys, or working individuals like you guys do. So a few more questions I have for you is, have you seen any, or what kind of experiences have you had with SROs, whether that's personal, professional, or in any kind of situation?
As far as personal experiences with SROs, kind of touches in, I guess, a compare and contrast. When I was growing up, I grew up in Delaware, and I grew up in a military family. I was very respected with military, police, law enforcement. But our school didn't have school resource officers. We had state police that came for football games to make sure that nothing happened, to make sure things were secure and there were no fights that broke out between schools. And that was it. They weren't in the school participating with the kids. We didn't really have that exposure outside of the DARE program when I was little and, seeing them at football games. So when I came here and started working with the police department, and I saw how involved our SROs were with the schools and the community and having us come out, I met up with Dory when I was on patrol, and we helped pull a bus or pull a vehicle. We do plane pull. Yeah, we did all sorts of stuff, and seeing how intertwined they are. And one of our lieutenants still has people come up to him and remembers him as their SRO. So it's kind of really cool to see how involved and ingrained they are in that fundamental time in their life.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one question that isn't up there that I think would be really important was, how big was that shift? Like, can you quantify that? Was that, when you saw that, was that more of a culture shock, or what kind of feelings were happening when you saw the differences between your original community and the Arlington community?
It wasn't so much that it was a culture shock. It was kind of, like I said, we always respected law enforcement and military, but it was very separated. So I respected from afar. Whereas seeing how much, the kids are coming up to the SROs, or seeing how much the SROs are joking around with the kids, and how it's very fluid and a lot more relaxed, was very much a positive thing that made me want to see how I could and take on that role and also have those positive interactions.
Definitely, definitely. And then we did mention a few social changes, not necessarily explicitly. So how have you seen recent events, both on Black Lives Matter and the sort of introduction of the SRO discussion within the county, impact not only teens, but the community itself?
I think that we've seen a very large shift and a lot of people talking about a lot of everything we see in the media and the awareness of social injustices. And there's been a lot of thoughts across the board, whether you're a teenager or you're an adult. A lot of the questions that you guys have are the same questions that we're asking ourselves as adults, we're asking ourselves as citizens, we're asking ourselves as police. And, you know, having to question, is what's happening the right way to do things? Are there better ways to do things? How can we change? How can we improve? And no matter the age, the questions are still the same. So, you know, it's been great seeing everybody from across the county and teenagers, young kids, adults all come together for the different protests and to participate by putting signs up and to come to police. And I've had people knock on my window thanking for what we do, but also saying, I recognize that there needs to be change. And, you know, you guys are going to participate in that. We know it. So it's been really good to see everybody stand up for things that they believe in and then also try to make it happen.
Definitely. I definitely agree that there has to be some sort of action. And this discussion, or host room, if you will, is only the beginning of that. And we'll learn more with Dorian Brooks. We'll explore the SRO dynamics a bit more. But I do want to mention how important this discussion is today. We really want to involve both community members, teens, and SROs and other forms of law enforcement in our county to have this discussion. And I think it's really important that we have every perspective at this table, so to speak. So thank you, Detective Souls, for your answers. I really appreciated them. I will move on with Detective Brooks. We have a few questions for you as well. You did mention how what your background was as an SRO. I think it was about 9 years or so. Could you just elaborate more on that and how long it was?
Yeah, sure. So the past 3 years, I've been an SRO assigned to middle schools and elementary. I've been primarily assigned to Swanson Middle School, Barrett and McKinley Elementary. So my involvement or exposure to the other schools would be, you know, if we have lockdown drills or, you know, substance abuse like presentations or any type of, you know, collaborative presentations or teaching points with some of the other SROs. But those have been the schools where I've been located the past 3 years, and I miss it. I miss being around the kids. I miss being around, you know, the faculty, the staff, administration, and the community as a whole. And, you know, I enjoy the work. You know, I'm hoping that we can work towards some type of an agreement to get us back in the school safely. And that's not just the police, but everyone. I understand you all are in a bit of a hybrid format right now. But so that's my background as an SRO. In terms of high school, I coached football at WNL last year. I'm a family man. I just welcomed my daughter last year, and so that's kind of taken my time a little away from coaching. But you know, as she gets a little bit older, I hope to get back into in coaching, because it's a great way to give back to the community. And I'm also, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm an Arlington resident as well. So one day my kids will be Arlington Public School students as well.
Yeah. So first off, congratulations on, you know, your growing family. I'm really excited to hear about that. And I think, you know, one thing that's really important, at least when we talk to you, at least, is what kind of dynamics we see within the school. Really, I think that's the biggest question for you to tell us more about. So why did you become an SRO? And then what was the job description in your opinion?
Yeah, so I wanted to become a school resource officer because growing up, so unlike Kimberly, so I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. So I'm not from Arlington, grew up just south from here and off of I-95. And in my upbringing, you know, I grew up in a middle class family home. You know, both of my parents worked, but the climate with police in the community, in some areas like today, it wasn't that great. There was not a lot of trust in law enforcement. And so my first real exposure to or interaction with police was through my SRO, in my school, at my high school. And so for me, I was very apprehensive at first and, not necessarily trusting based off of the things that I saw growing up on TV, whether it was, TV shows or, when I was really young, we had Rodney King, the LA riots back in the day. And so there was a lot of fear, for me being, at the time, a Black kid. And, I just didn't trust. And so it wasn't until, I came across that SRO and he was a positive figure. He was a mentor. He was, someone that I viewed as a trusted adult. Now I'm not saying that that's what led me to become an SRO, but it played a role in terms of my time within Arlington, within the community. Obviously, as we know, back in 2013, the onset of everything that happened with Trayvon Martin and then, the Ferguson incidents. A lot of times, like Kimberly spoke to, we would have these conversations at work, but we don't necessarily, hear it from the kids. I worked in South Arlington and I would come across some kids sometimes that would talk to me and ask me about it. But I knew when I wanted to transition into the schools, I wanted to be I wanted to be that positive figure that SRO was for me. And, if you don't have a lot of exposure to law enforcement, if your only interaction is a negative interaction, say you got pulled over, you got a ticket, or, and for some families, maybe, the police had to come to their home for something, I wanted to try to bridge that gap and build that relationship. And so for me, I'm all about positive impacts. And, as cliche as it sounds, like I really got into this work trying to, make the world better. As cheesy as that sounds, I really believe that I'm very passionate about it. And so, coming into the schools, I didn't necessarily know what to expect, but it's been one of the best jobs, best spots that I've been in the police department. I get to interact with kids on a daily basis and talk to them, get to know them, aside from, the core functions of, keeping the school safe. Safety and security is the most important, but that's why I got into it and why I wanted to become an SRO.
And I think you're definitely right about, the intentions that SROs need to have within the school system. And I really appreciate how you witnessed things in your life previously and, use those as not necessarily a main reason, as you said, but mainly as, a point of perspective and knowledge. And I think one thing we don't mention too often is that the roles of SROs were, I think, in my opinion, were largely defined by 9/11. And I think a lot of people are somewhat connected to this tragedy just because a lot of older people, at least, well, I wasn't around. My family did live in Arlington at the time. And you could hear the Pentagon within earshot of that plane crashing to the side of the building. And I think my understanding is that the school system really wanted to make sure that kids were safe in that situation. Because when you have something like that go on within 5-6 miles of the schools, you don't know what's going to happen to your students who are 2-3 rooms down. So I think it's really important that we define, what are acceptable reasons for SROs to get in here. And then on top of that, what kind of expectations are expected between community members and SROs. And then with that, like that kind of relationship, how you did touch on this a bit, but how would you describe your relationship with your students? What kind of words would you use?
I would say overall, I feel that I had a great relationship. I came into it. I have a background in working with kids. Prior to being a police officer, I played in the National Football League, and so we would have a ton of events. NFL Play 60, where we would do kids camps. When I was in college, I played football in college, and we would have spring camps where we invite kids, and so that interaction and just that was something that I always enjoyed. But I also knew that everyone is different, and so for me, coming into the schools, I always tried to find ways to connect with each kid because not everyone's the same. And also, not everyone has a positive view of law enforcement,
Exactly.
for myself, even if I feel that the majority of my relationships or I shouldn't say the majority, but even though a lot of people viewed law enforcement or the SROs as positive, there were some that, did not, what this badge represent was not positive for them in their lives. And so I had to be, empathetic and compassionate towards them as well, to try to, get to know them and understand why, because and it's not, I never took it personal. It's one of those things where, regardless, but just because a majority or a lot of students or staff may have felt that way, I never dismissed the feelings of those who didn't. And I think that it's important that we kind of take a look at how we do things to address those things, because it's a real thing. I'm a big guy, we have all this equipment. Not everyone thinks it's necessary to have a gun in the schools. And so
Definitely, I really agree. And I think there is, at least from my perspective, like what kind of relationship I have with SROs. I do remember very strictly, this one time I was just walking through the halls and I did see two SROs talking, because they weren't inherently like threatening to me, but I did really feel scared when I was walking by them. Whether that was because they were wearing a lot of equipment or they were, holding weapons. Obviously, they're very well trained, at least from my understanding.
Yeah.
But even then, just being a young Black man, and I know you share some of these same sentiments too. It's not. You're almost rolling the dice every time you walk by a cop car. You're almost, you're on your feet a little bit more, and you're just looking a bit more sometimes. And it's not necessarily unfair, but it's unreasonable in most circumstances.
Well, I mean,
But
in some ways you can say it's unfair. I mean,
it is
be
unfair,
honest,
definitely.
we have this conversation. I mean,
Mhm.
that's how it is in society. And so now we're trying to work to combat that
Exactly.
and shift that. But no, I mean, I feel the same way. When I'm not working, if I'm walking down the street, or I shouldn't say down the street because I live in Arlington, officers know who I am. But if I go into the district, if I go into Alexandria, I'm still a Black man, so I have those same, fears and views, that you're
Mhm.
speaking to. And so within the school system, I'm cognizant of that and I'm aware of that. And while I can't change my uniform, what I can do is try my hardest to make sure that the students and the staff are as comfortable around me as possible.
Definitely. And I think, hopefully this kind of sentiment gets passed around through the police force in general, especially with both of you here today. I really hope that, one of the outcomes on your part today will just be adjusting, whatever beliefs that you hold to match that, and at least create the most amount of safe interactions. And on top of that, the best kind of image for the police force in Arlington. So you did touch on like what you did through the school, but to what extent while you were an SRO did you feel that you were keeping the school safe?
Well, it's a great question because it's hard to, in terms of qualitative or quantitative, how do we know that what we are doing is working? There are no stats or data that says, well, Detective Brooks prevented X amount of crimes from occurring in the schools. Like that, we'll never know. And so I think that is something that, we need to examine and, look at how we're doing things and is it actually working? But with that said, I definitely feel that the work that I did, kept the school safe. I mean, we, you know, thankfully, luckily, we didn't have too many incidents, but there would be occasional incidents where, there's something maybe going on right outside of the school that, we maybe secure the school and make sure that, keep an outside threat from coming in, or if there's something going on within the school. I'm not, talking about anything serious, but just being that visible presence within the school is a deterrent, to crime. And so, but not just on that level, but then also, serving as, that, role model, that informal leader in the form of a police officer, because of what we spoke to before, like those fears that, might have existed in, removing that opportunity to get to know and build a relationship with a police officer, you know, again, it's hard to say, you know, what was prevented, but in my experiences, you know, there were students that I built relationships with that may have been going down a path that, you know, through continued conversations and understanding, you know, they had a different outlook on, you know, whether it's different, you know, crimes or whatever it was that they might have been getting involved with. And so it's tough to say, or it's hard to I guess prove it. And I also don't want to say, well, just ask about me, because the most important thing is not everyone has that positive view. And so I don't want to, you know, dismiss those folks' feelings. And so, but I'd like to think that, you know, my role and my presence in the schools kept the school safe.
Definitely. And I think one thing that, you know, is said within the community, at least within teens, is that police officers do have the best intention for their communities. This issue is not just because you are wearing blue, or you happen to be wearing blue, or you happen to be carrying certain things or a certain level of training. It's just because, in a way, these things have been abused by other individuals. And it's sad to say that, but it is true. You know, we have seen individuals who are being unfairly treated, and that, like I said earlier, is inherently unreasonable. We shouldn't have that kind of inequity, and we shouldn't have that problem to exist in the first place. And I think we can touch back a bit more on your experience just as a person as a whole. You know, I don't know how many perspectives you have on this question, but how do you think, same question from earlier, how do you think movements such as Black Lives Matter have impacted your job and your change, if at all? And, you know, I really do want to stress how important, you know, your intersectionality is, both as a, you know, an older Black gentleman, and as a police officer, and as a Arlington native, and somewhat a Richmond person.
Yeah, I think that if anything, well, for me, I can tell you it hasn't changed anything. You know, I've dealt with discrimination, microaggressions, racism my entire life. But what I will say is, as a society, we're moving in a direction where we're more comfortable with having these conversations. And so I would say that's probably the biggest thing, you know, throughout all of this is, you know, I was an SRO at a North Arlington school. You know, my students were predominantly white. And so I thought that it was awesome, the number of students that would come and have conversations with me about what they were seeing on TV, which led to, you know, kind of like the birth of this program that myself and Kimberly are working on. So if anything, I would say, you know, this movement has put it right in, you know, right in the middle of our faces. And unfortunately, as terrible as this pandemic has been, because of a lot of, you know, what's gone on over the past year, we've all been at home sitting on our couch and we're watching this. And so we're getting more exposure to it. So I'd say that's the biggest thing, is that we are moving in a direction towards, you know, we need to have these conversations. We need to work towards, you know, change, because at the end of the day, you know, if the SROs are truly a part of the community, we want to make this better as well, you know. And so and we're one part of it. You know, there are many parts, you know, to the criminal justice system, but, you know, the police departments, you know, they play a role as well.
Definitely. And I don't know if you guys explicitly mentioned your work, Detective Souls, Detective Brooks. Would you like to take a moment and just explain exactly what kind of project you've been working on lately?
Kim, do you want to go in depth?
Sure. So we have been working on essentially a series of discussions that are going to take place. We're going to try to do some virtually. Hopefully, COVID will subside a little bit, and with weather getting nicer, maybe we can do some in person. But they're going to be a series of guided discussions similar to kind of what you're doing today, to bring light to important topics of implicit bias and equality and social injustices, how all of those play into in questions about the police, how they play into the criminal justice system and systemic racism, how of all of those kind of need to be brought to aware, the different questions and the feelings associated with them, because the experiences I have are going to be different than the experiences Dorian has had and different experiences that you've had and the other members that are attending today. And it doesn't necessarily mean that my experience is wrong or my thoughts about a certain experience are wrong, because my feelings are valid and how it made me feel is important to address.
100%. Yeah.
And other people's feelings about certain things and their perceptions and their perspective on those things are really important to address and understand and hear out, to get that understanding from people that aren't from the same background as you and don't look like you or don't sound like you. It's really important to hear that diversity and those different sort of opinions. So we're going to have those guided discussions, and then ultimately we also want to have some different scenarios that address everything. So you get to see firsthand how everything can tie in and kind of have a little bit of fun with it, and also learn and hopefully create a little bit of change, positivity, and mend some relationships, hopefully.
Definitely. Before, if you have anything to say, Detective Brooks, I do want to mention there is one project that, this kind of reminds me of, and with some of my teammates on my Ultimate Frisbee team, I did lead a similar discussion about like once a week, and we really talked about those issues, because I think in the future I plan to study econ, or just generally I describe myself as a social scientist as in general. We really have to understand what kind of layers we've been creating throughout society, and what those implications do to people, whether they're alive or sadly they've passed away because of issues that have existed for the past half millennia, past 400, 500 years now, which is insane to think about. And I'm really glad that, even if it is sometimes, a little bit behind, you guys are still doing something to address it. And you guys and you guys are not taking the blame for it necessarily, but you are saying, hey, we need to step up and we need to make sure what we're doing is to the best quality of our community members. Detective Brooks, anything you have to say?
No, I think Detective Souls covered it well, and I definitely want to move forward with kind of hear.
Definitely, no, definitely. So I think now, before we thank you to Detective Souls and Detective Brooks once again for answering all of our questions today, we are going to open the floor to the entire meeting. So if you do have any questions for either any of myself or any of the members or the police officers joining us today, you're more than welcome to ask. I think one question, at least I can ask to the both of you, is what kind of, so one question for you specifically, Detective Brooks. You did mention about how we measure the effectiveness of SROs in the schools. You did mention that there isn't one kind of metric or some sort of standardized method of measuring that, but what have you seen being used as sort of a measuring stick for how well a person interacts with their schools? Whether that's maybe not definitive, I totally get. It's something to measure up in a way.
Yeah, so currently the only thing that exists, because each school is kind of like their own kingdom, the principals and the administrators kind of, run their schools differently. Obviously, APS has, I'm sure their own like code of conduct and whatnot, but we do operate off of a memorandum of understanding. But aside from that, the only, I guess I could say, what's the word I'm looking, evaluation of whether or not the SROs are doing a good job is it's individual SROs. And so I think at the end, at least once a year, the administrators and APS leadership meet with our leadership, and they kind of give a report on, hey, is this SRO doing a good job? What are areas where they're deficient, things they need to improve on, recommendations on whether they need to be transferred, to another school or out of the school in general, because they're not a good fit. But that's the only thing that, to my knowledge, that we have now. Like I spoke to earlier, I think that there's something that we need to look at as a whole to measure the effectiveness of the SRO program. And it sounds like that's in the work. Was just in a work group, an SRO working group, where we had these discussions.
Definitely. And I think on top of that, how do you feel about certain measures or certain changes to how you're evaluated in terms of, creating a, measurement system or an evaluation system that's sort of robust that, maybe the public can see, or maybe certain individuals have access to within the school system that aren't necessarily admins or certain high level APS individuals. What do you think about that?
I mean, personally, I have no issue with it. I mean, I think the biggest thing when it comes to, our line of work, and when we deal, and deal with like the investigative or enforcement part of it, because we're talking about children and kids, there is a level of confidentiality where we can't,
Definitely.
give that information. But in terms of an evaluation of my performance or what I'm doing, I have no problem with that. I mean, I come to work every day, and I have an obligation to, keep the public's trust and to, act in a way that is representative of our department's core values and principles of government leadership. So I don't have any issue with that.
Mhm. And then one question to you, Detective Souls. We do hear a lot about, certain symbols such as like back the blue and, protect our police officers. You did mention that your family at least had held the military and the police force very highly, but what kind of thoughts have you been having about, does back the blue truly represent what the police force is about? And, is there anything you have to say about that?
I mean, I understand the sentiment, but I think that it has been, skewed. I think people think that you can't support the police and also support change and also support that there need to be addressed, social injustices need to be addressed. You can, in fact, fight for both, and you can support both. And in fact, I think you should. I think we both do, and all of us do. And that's why, Dorian and I are here, is because we do support our police department. We do support our agency, but we also support the fact that there needs to be positive change. And if we've been doing something that could be done better, then absolutely we want to do something that's better so that everybody's treated fairly and people are having equal treatment and things are being addressed. The whole blind coverage of blue escapes any kind of, judgment or any kind of evaluation. It's not appropriate. And I think that is what we stand for. And if I was doing something that was inappropriate, I have no doubt that Dorian would have no problem addressing that with me and my superiors, and vice versa, because we are the first line of holding each other accountable. And how are we expected to hold other people and our citizens accountable if we're not holding ourselves accountable? And I think that is an important part of it. And if we stop doing that and disregard it just because we're the police, then we lose all trust in the community that we're supposed to be here for and be a member of.
I definitely agree. While those kind of statements are very inaccurate, just because it creates a huge stereotype about police officers that all they want to do is harm certain individuals because they feel it's right to do so, or that they're saving something or someone. In reality, I think a lot of young individuals realize this too, because in a way that they're trying to change the world, you are trying to change your communities, and you're doing that by attending these kinds of things and having your own discussions. But another question I have for you is, you did touch on like the type of integrity. In the future, what do you think should be changed to make sure that integrity exists for as long as the police system exists?
I think the constant level of checks and balances. I know that we, have started having body cams, which anybody I've talked to, aside from possibly having one more piece of paperwork to fill out, we don't have a problem with, because you shouldn't be acting any differently than you were before that camera was turned on. And there shouldn't be any differences between that. So it shouldn't affect anything. And if that's a checks and balance, and if that's going to hold me accountable and also hold everybody else accountable, it's going to help on a lot of court cases and a lot of things that are after us, because it is going to show, if there is something where I was out of line and there's a complaint made, and it's easier to check on that. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. If that is what is going to keep the trust and keep everybody safe and make sure that we are employing and training and keeping good members of our department, there's not an issue with that. And I think that there's going to be a continued level of that. I mean, with our police practices group and having civilian boards to kind of overlook police, a lot of police departments are incorporating some level of that to have civilian oversight or kind of working hand in hand to go over police policies and practices. You know, I think that it's important for citizens in the community to know how we are doing what we're doing and how it is that we are serving you. We are here as members of the community, and there shouldn't be a hidden veil about that. Aside from possibly tactics to keep you safe, there's no problems. Any policy you want to see, you can go on our website and look up exactly what we're allowed to do and what we're not to do.
Definitely. And I think
And there's a, I'm sorry, Lukeman. There is a question in the chat really quick.
Oh, definitely. I did not see that.
No problem. That's what I'm here for.
Yeah, I did not see that. Go ahead and read it for me. I can't necessarily see
All right. So the question is for SROs. How are students notified about their rights when interacting with police on and off campus?
Oh, yeah. So that's for the both of you.
Yeah, so I can answer it since I have the experience in the schools. And so my understanding, just speaking in terms of within the schools, there is like a Know Your Rights campaign that is done actually not with the SROs, at least not at my schools, but I want to say our health and physical education teachers kind of run that at the middle school level. However, for me, in terms of any time where I am having an investigation where there's a detention, meaning like someone is being detained, one, their parents are contacted first. And so part of our agreement with the schools is that we contact the parents and we make, an actual attempt. And I'm not talking about, hey, I pull up my phone, I call, didn't answer, that's it. No, we actually, make a concerted effort, barring this, there's no exigent circumstance to contact the parent and have them either there present or via conference call. So then they are read their rights and they understand their rights and understand that, one, they don't have to talk to me. For me, just speaking on how I did things at the middle school and even at the elementary schools, which I can't even say elementary school. I didn't really have anything at elementary school, but at the middle school level, the administrator was in the room as well. And so you have this trusted adult that, who is separate from the police, that their priority is they care about you. And so that's something that we ensure that the students know their rights, whether or not, they paid attention to the Know Your Rights campaign during school. And in fact, I'd have a ton of kids that would come by my office and would talk to me about it. And we'd do little scenarios or, I'd quiz them or things like that.
I just want to follow up a little bit on that as well. It is also something that we are incorporating into the program that we talked about, is to know your rights and different things, because legislation keeps changing. And so we wanted to make sure that kids are aware of their rights and kind of what to do and how to move forward. And should there be something where they have questions about it or they feel like their rights weren't, fully protected, then kind of how to address that later, so that that's brought up, because we don't want anybody who is a kid ever being taken advantage of, and in the fact that they don't know their rights are now being violated, or they're not entitled to all the things that they should have been. So we want to make sure that kids are fully aware. And, at the end of this, I'll give you guys my email. If you guys have any questions, you guys can follow up with any of those as well.
Yeah, so I think in terms of timing, we did expect to go a bit further, but we are glad that we got a few questions answered. We don't have enough time necessarily to discuss these questions, but hopefully everyone within this discussion has learned a lot, and I have learned a lot too. Hopefully both detectives have gained a little bit of insight, including myself and everyone in attendance. So yeah.
Lukeman,
so
really
thank-
quick. Lukeman, really
Oh,
quick.
sorry.
One more question in the chat. I want to make sure it
No
gets
problem.
answered.
Yeah, go ahead. That last question.
Yes, go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
So I'll pose this to both officers, but there's been a lot of talk, especially now with Arlington, where their financial situation isn't doing very good. And basically a big, like some people, a lot of the thing, like, you know, you can't put a price on kids' safety, but from a realistic point of view, also like Arlington's not made of money, right? And so I was wondering from both your perspectives as someone who's been more, you know, during the online and also someone who's served in the thing, have you noticed any great or even small, like, you know, waste of resources or things like that, or in addition, basically things you feel like money for SROs or programs can be better used, like, you know, there's carjackings and stuff like that. Like basically, have you noticed any things where you see money could easily be saved, or a place where you probably the money spent on something would probably be better spent on something else?
I mean, I'll try to answer that because just let me know if I'm off course. Well, I can tell you in over the past year, since we've kind of been removed from the schools due to COVID, whether it's distance learning or, you know, now with the implementation of the body cameras, in terms of resources with our department, with our agency, if there are, you know, to the example of like carjackings, and if you're speaking to the incidents occurring in South Arlington, Crystal City area, Pentagon City area, or even North Arlington, we do dedicate resources to that. I can't get into the specifics of it because I don't know all of it, but we do allocate resources to address those concerns. Now within the schools, in terms of if it's something where maybe that could be something else could be utilized, whether that's, you know, maybe more counselors or some other type of resource in place of it. You know, I don't know. I can only speak to what I view and why I view the SROs as being valuable and why I view them as a need in the schools. But I understand. I mean, you have, you know, great reason to have questions about that. I don't know if I had answered it.
I guess a better way to rephrase the question, maybe also Officer Souls might, because again, she hasn't been in person, so she like, it might have a different perspective. Is there anything you feel like that's not a productive use of money, basically?
I think that Arlington is very community driven and we have community outreach teams. And because that is one of our main core missions is community outreach and being a member out there, I think that the SRO, which does fall under the same umbrella as our community outreach team, it's twofold. So we have the community outreach team that addresses things on the everyday out, you know, community civic association meetings and having coffee with a cop and kind of addressing questions that adults have. Our role is still a community-based situation that is also safety in the schools, but you're still serving that community point of contact and that community mentorship. So I think those, you know, the benefits of having those are things that grow over time, and the money that you put in for those aren't necessarily something you see immediately, because our interactions are going to just slowly grow as everything does in life, in your experience and the people that you meet, and you're going to see them over time, not necessarily immediately. So, you know, if we get removed from schools, obviously, you know, we would be reassigned to different parts of the community, whether it is back on patrol or assisting detectives or on our community outreach team. There are other things that could be done. And hopefully we don't have to address that, because I would like to come and work in one of the schools. But I think that the payoff of having us in the schools is important as having our outreach teams.
Yeah, thank you, Sebastian, for your question. To everyone else who's asked questions before, we are running a bit sort of behind schedule. We did plan to end at 3:30. So I'll quickly run through some of these questions. We won't answer any of these necessarily, but I think two questions that I think are important to answer on your own, little homework for you guys, is for everyone in attendance. What have you learned personally today? And secondly, why is it important to have these kinds of discussions? So that's just so you know, or something to ponder on after today's discussion. But yeah, overall, we want to say thank you, or I want to say thank you to everyone in attendance, to our Detective Souls and Detective Brooks, And I really want to stress how important this discussion is just for TNB in itself. We really want to emphasize how many diverse opinions we have within the organization itself. And we really want to use that as a mirror to measure what we're seeing in the world. And I think this discussion, or at least talking about this, is really important. And I think one last thing we can do is to the both of you, why don't you take 45 seconds each and just talk about why this discussion in particular is so important to our community. Detective Brooks.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that it's important. Like we said, I mean, in order for us to come together and in order for us to affect change, like we have to have these conversations. I don't have all the answers. I can go out every day and try to make a positive impact, but I still may be missing the mark somewhere. And so by having conversations, with young people, with all people, it's the only way to really get the ball rolling and work towards some type of change. We spoke to restorative justice earlier. I'm a part of the Restorative Arlington implementation team, and so I'm for restorative justice. A lot of the incidents that occurred within the schools, I believe restorative practices, can work. And so I think that it's conversations like this that we can really, we're in the right direction. You guys are doing an excellent job, and I want to continue this conversation with the program that me and Kimberly are working on.
And I'm going to echo what he said. I think it's great what you're doing. I think it's great that you guys are, being aware and trying to affect change on these major life issues and these major world things. And it's really inspiring to see you guys have such passion for it. And we obviously have passion for it as well. And think that the conversations that are taking place with you guys and conversations that we want to have are crucial to mend relationships and make our community better and hopefully make the future better. And, as cheesy it sounds, is making the world better in its whole, is working through those conversations that have not been had for far longer than they should have gone, unfortunately. So it's really great to take that positive step forward. And thank you for having us.
Yeah, thank you to the both of you once again. Thank you to everyone in attendance today. And a special thank you to our TNB members who also came today. Maggie, Avalon, Tyler, everyone who came in today. I don't have enough time to mention you each by name, but I'm glad that you guys were able to show up and just be a part of the discussion. So yeah, once again, this is a multi-part series among the Project Pete's host room, and we really appreciate you guys joining us today. All in all, I really am glad about how the discussion went. Thank you to both detectives for spending your afternoons with us, and thank you to any community members who did the same. Apart from that, good afternoon, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your days. If everyone in attendance wants to stay back to the main group, we can also do that.